What's up everyone? In this video, I'm going to show you everything you need to get started learning Vietnamese.
Everything the light touches.
And if you're learning a different language, these concepts apply to pretty much any other language too. Just so you know, the steps I'm about to tell you aren't my own ideas, but rather a summarization of steps that I've taken from the mass immersion approach, which I talk about in my first video. Okay, so one of the biggest obstacles to learning a language is simply getting started. In the beginning, you understand nothing at all, so everything seems too difficult. That's why in this video, I'm going to break it down into 3 steps to help you ease into the language and start learning in no time. If you already know some basic things of your target language, then check the timestamps down in the description to see which section is most suitable for you. So without further ado, let's get started. Step 1, learn the alphabet. This step does not apply to every single language, but for languages like Vietnamese, Hindi, Arabic, or any European language, then this step does apply. Chances are, you probably don't even remember learning the alphabet in your native language, so it might feel a bit strange to do it in another language. But of course, this step is still extremely important because it will help you to create a foundation for everything else. Now, I don't know about you, but my favorite way to learn things is by watching YouTube. There's pretty much a video for everything, and that includes language as well. Regular videos teaching the alphabet are great, but on top of that, I recommend finding an alphabet song in your target language. Will it be for toddlers? Probably. Does it work? Yes. Take the ABCs, for example. If you're a native English speaker, you could be hit by a truck, wake up, not know what your name is, but I bet you could still sing the ABCs. So anyway, after getting familiar with the alphabet and the sounds of the letters, let's move on to the next step. Step 2, pronunciation. This step is extremely important, especially in the beginning. When learning a new language, of course, we're not going to get the pronunciation perfect right away. But we want to get the pronunciation as correct as we can before we start speaking. So when we do start speaking, we won't make any really bad habits that will be harder to break down the road. One example of this is when Vietnamese people call me Casta instead of Carter. In Vietnamese, the R makes the Z sound, and they pronounce the like Obviously, these are pretty bad mistakes, and those that have done this mistake for a long time will have to make a really conscious effort to fix it when they're speaking. Some of them never end up fixing it, and they speak like that all their life.
What the hell are you talking about?
To be honest, I wish I had focused on pronunciation and the tones a bit more before trying to speak Vietnamese, because in the beginning, I developed quite a few bad habits, mispronouncing certain sounds and tones. And these habits were pretty hard to break because it's how my brain and my mouth were used to saying it. But guys, don't get me wrong, mistakes are inevitable. But it's still better to minimize the problem now rather than solve it later. But still, pronunciation is tricky, especially with a tonal language like Vietnamese. Unless you've listened to the language a lot and your ear has been trained to hear the sounds, then it's pretty hard to tell if you're actually pronouncing the sounds correctly. When starting out, it's very common to think we're saying it right. I think all of us can relate to the following scenario. We've been practicing and we feel ready to show off our skills. So we start speaking some words to a native speaker, but the native speaker starts to look confused and doesn't actually understand what we're saying. And then a piece of your soul is crushed because you thought you were doing a really good job, but it turns out you've been doing it wrong the whole time. And yeah, it sucks. I've been there. But of course, the past is the past, right? So now that you know why it's important to focus on pronunciation, here are 4 tips to help you do it. Start listening to your target language. Listen to content by native speakers for native speakers. In the beginning, you won't understand anything they're saying, but that's okay.
I understand nothing.
The point is to start training your ears to hear the sounds of that language. The amount of time you spend listening totally depends on you. If you listen for 10 minutes a day, that's fine. 2 hours a day is great. But the bottom line is, the more that you listen, the more you train your ears to start picking up the sounds. This step is ongoing, because listening plays a huge role in the language learning process. It could also be useful to listen to your language for a few hours before even beginning to learn pronunciation, so you're more familiar with the sounds of the language before you start. Find a good resource to learn pronunciation in your target language. So it could be from a YouTube video, an online course, a starter book, with some audio, or even a friend who is a native speaker of that language. Keep in mind that if you're trying to learn a particular accent, then make sure it's that accent. Don't be like me and buy a course online for $12 only to find out that it's in the wrong accent 2 months later. Side note, I'm currently working on a video to show you my favorite YouTube channels for listening to Vietnamese. When it's available, it'll be in the description below. But anyway, let's get to the next step. Record yourself. Now, I know a lot of you see this and you're like, nope, I'm not doing that. Thanks, Carter, but I'm gonna skip this one. But look, I know it can be cringy to listen to yourself, but that goes away pretty quickly. You get used to it, trust me. Then you'll be really happy you recorded yourself because you'll be able to hear and fix all the mistakes you're making that you didn't notice before.
Just do it!
And by the way, it's useful to record yourself on camera as well so you can see how your mouth moves when you speak. Not only is it beneficial to hear your mistakes, but in the future, you can look back on your videos and see how much you've improved. That can be a really big motivator because we all know what it's like to be studying a language, but you feel like you're going nowhere, when in reality, you are improving, but you're improving slowly. It's like watching your kids grow up. Like, you don't really realize they're growing until you see them and you're like, oh my gosh, this kid is taller than me. It's pretty much the same thing with language learning. So I highly recommend that you bear the cringe for now and just record yourself. All right, so this leads to the next step. Find a native speaker to verify your pronunciation. This is another thing that is ongoing. It really helps to do this throughout your language learning journey. Of course, your pronunciation won't be perfect right away, and it doesn't have to be. It just has to be good enough that you can move on without making really bad habits. If you live in the middle of nowhere or there isn't anyone that speaks your target language around you, you could try a language learning app or an online language exchange. With the internet, there's always a way. So if you're learning Vietnamese, then I have links for everything down below, including the alphabet and pronunciation for both the northern and southern accents. Okay, so let's move on to the last step. Step 3, vocabulary and grammar. If you've seen my very first video, which is right here, then you probably know that I study by using the mass immersion approach. For those that don't know, the mass immersion approach is pretty much what it sounds like. It's a lot of immersion, but it also uses another very effective tool, which are flashcards. So for you to start improving your vocabulary and grammar, I recommend you get a grammar book or set of books for your target language. Here's an example of the first one I used to get started with Vietnamese. It starts off teaching you the very basics to get you going. If you'd like to order your own book, I have some links down below to order some Vietnamese grammar books on Amazon. Those links do support me, so if you use them, then I really appreciate it. So anyway, what you could do first is just go through the book with a highlighter and highlight all the sentences that have a new word or grammar structure. It doesn't have to be every single sentence. If it's just a weird sentence or something you already know, or something you'll probably never use, then you can skip it. But if it's a specific grammar structure or new word that the book is teaching, then I would highlight that. You'll likely highlight at least a few hundred sentences in each book, or even more if the book is really big, because when you're starting off, everything is new. So I recommend highlighting the sentences first, because that way, when you're making the flashcards, you can go through the book pretty quickly, find those highlighted sentences, and put them into Anki. If you're wondering how to use Anki, there's a few video tutorials online, but it's a pretty big topic, so I'll be making a dedicated video to help you out with that. Check the description of this video to see if my Anki tutorial is there yet. If it's not, then it's coming soon. But put simply, the flashcards will have the sentence in your target language on the front and the translation on the back. That's it. So guys, to recap. First, learn the alphabet and the sounds of the letters. Next, start listening to native content and learn the pronunciation. And finally, create your first 1,000 flashcards from a grammar book or books of your target language. These flashcards will help to teach you the fundamental vocabulary words and the most common grammar structures at the same time. Make as many flashcards as you want, but it's advised to make about 10 to 20 each day so your flashcard reviews don't pile up too quickly. Use whatever time you have left to immerse in the language. That can be from books, radio, TV, YouTube, and so on. Just make sure that it's content by native speakers for native speakers. And remember, the more you immerse, the more you improve. Okay, so that's gonna wrap up this video. If you enjoyed it, then make sure to subscribe so you'll know when I have more videos in the future. And leave me a thumbs up or thumbs down if you didn't like it, whatever you wanna do. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.